What's up, guys? It is Emily. Just wanted to chat with you about the resumes that you submitted. I'm going to go through each one, offer a little bit of insight. Hopefully, you can learn a little something from taking at the look of your peers and hearing my comments about the things that we all create. This feedback is meant to drive your resume to its next best place, knowing, of course, that it will always be under construction. It should always be complete and also always under construction. Tall order. Heads up, here are a couple of things I want you guys to be thinking about as you continue to work on your resume in this class and moving forward into Port 7 and beyond. Is there a clear connection between the skills and experiences you've listed in the media communications industry? So that is to say, if your aspiration is to be a graphic designer, then you need to show skills and experiences related to graphic design on your resume. Likewise, if you want to be in social media, your resume needs to reflect that. If you identify a gap between ultimately what you want to be and the skills and experiences you have, you need to ask yourself, how can I build that necessary skill or experience before you graduate? Does that take the form of volunteer work, an internship, a project that you make up and document for yourself? There's any number of ways that you can address that issue. As opposed to talking just about what you were tasked with doing in any given role or any given group project, talk about your contribution and your accomplishment within that role. Anytime we have a job, sure, there are the tasks that we have to do as part of having that job, but it's how we do those tasks that show our unique value and ultimately like what we'll bring to a position. Spell check, I can't say it enough. When you're using these creative programs like InDesign or Illustrator, Photoshop, they all have spell check functionality. Use it, but spell check is not going to identify misused words. Now that is something that I see quite a bit. Students use the word defiantly when they want to say definitely. Students will type the word costumer when they want to talk about a customer. And these are things that spell check will not catch, but hopefully a trusted human eye, a skilled editor, a friend, Wendy Walzer will be able to help you with. Keep adding to it. We talked about under construction, and Wendy Walzer, Career Development Advisor for MCBS. You should have had at least one conversation with her by now. She will be your resource moving forward, to help with getting you placed into a job upon graduation, and will be a resource for you, from here on out. That's something that Full Sail offers. So now I'm going to jump out of this and into the resume. All right, so we're going to start off here with Joshua's resume. So you did a nice job making this visual. You've employed some good information hierarchy where I see these section headers that are big, draw my eye and my attention. The bullet points make it easily scannable, so nice job with all of that. I will say that it looks a little bit condensed, right? So maybe a little scrunched up. You've got a bit of extra spacing down here at the bottom, and I would say you could maybe pull your margins out just a little bit more here on the side and give it a bit more breathing room. I'd like to see a little bit more of a separation between this line here and when the bullets start. Additionally, if you pull this text over closer to the bullets, you might give yourself a line or two extra here, so that like this one, for instance, and this one here, maybe these last words won't wrap to that second line. Kind of taking a look at what you've chosen to capitalize here, it makes it a bit more difficult to read when words are in all caps, especially when you have it kind of like paired with stuff that's in just title case here. So my recommendation would be to just go ahead and make this title case, but perhaps bold it to give it a visual distinction from the text that falls here below it. Sort of noticeably absent from this version of your resume, I don't see any contact information, like how we can get in touch, or how I might be able to check out a portfolio website perhaps. So that's something that you want to be thinking about there. Additionally, When you have collegiate experience, there's no need to include your high school diploma here. The exception of which would be if you went to some sort of specialty high school and that you gained some kind of training or went through a curriculum that was relevant to your professional or career aspirations. So, for instance, if you went to a magnet school for media arts and you are pushing forward with a career in the media industry, that might be pertinent. Otherwise, you needed a diploma to get into college, so that's something that you don't need to list there. So the big opportunity here would be just some small tweaks to the formatting, your contact information, add a portfolio, website link, and just give somebody a little bit more full of a picture of what it is that you can do. Additionally, I don't see any listing here of any kind of technical skills or soft skills, right? So is there hardware and software that you have a proficiency with? So whether that's camera equipment or computer equipment or things like the Adobe suite, wanting to list that. Also, what is it that you can bring in terms of your soft skills when you're working on a team? Is it leadership? Is it communication? Is it delegation? These would also be things that you could include here to give folks a better picture of what it would be like to have you on a team and where you're going to be able to bring maximum impact. So next up, we're going to take a look at Hannah's resume here. So we see your name, Hannah, and then we see Hannah Nicole Creative Co. So for me, that's a bit of a disconnect. Not sure exactly why this is listed twice. Kind of scrolling down, we see that this jumps to a number of pages here, which is great because it shows that you have quite a bit of skills and experience. But you're really going to want to work on a version of this that is about 1 page total. So the exercise is about streamlining and getting really a distilled picture of your skill set. So, you have used almost half a page here just to share some of your contact information and where, you can get these additional portfolio assets from. So really, a lot can be done here. You could have your name on one line, your contact information up here, and already you've saved half a page. Kind of scrolling down, like you have a ton of skills, which is great. You know how to use words to talk about the work that you want to do. I want to see you give me a 1 to 2 sentence version of this because again, the exercise here is how to streamline this. And so what are your top skills, right? If you had to say like your top 6 skills, what would they be? Scrolling down, we see that you have a long work history, which includes, some, working in customer service, working in an administrative capacity, and a lot of different things. With your work history, I would put the most current at the top, so that looks like it's here at Panera. And knowing about what your aspirations are with your creative agency here, what if anything did you do at these places of business that caused you to use some of those skills that might be evident in what you did for Publix or what you did for Panera. Scrolling down, we've got your education, which is great and important to list. I don't see much here as far as your technical skills, right? So we've got a lot of kind of soft stuff and some like project manager stuff, but with your creative work, is there hardware or software equipment? Is it the Adobe suite? Definitely room there to kind of expand upon that to show how you're supporting your creative co, with those things. So again, for you, I think the biggest opportunity is to look for a way to do a 1-page version of this, because certainly you have a lot of skills and experience, but let's prioritize them and prioritize the language, distill it into its most powerful, impactful statements. Next up, we're going to take a look at crystals. So we've got a very visual version here. Kind of scrolling down, it gets kind of tight here at the bottom. And one way that you could give yourself a bit more breathing room is to have your name just here across the top and make this logo a bit smaller. That's going to move everything up on the page a little bit. Additionally, there's some You kind of go, you give yourself margins here and here, but now this is kind of going full screen or full page. I would just be consistent with that. You know, give yourself, observe this same margin all the way down, meaning that like if this is a visual line or a boundary, that your content needs to go on this side of it. And it looks like there's plenty of room to do that. So it would just kind of give it a bit more in terms of balance here on the page. You know, one other thing that I see is that this text over here is kind of black and dark, and then this is a little bit more like charcoal. This is bold in terms of a heading. This is not. So just some formatting inconsistencies that, like, if you you know, just make a few tweaks to, it'll give it a lot more visual cohesion. Looking at, you know, your experience, so you've got quite a bit of things here, which is great. Kind of scrolling down, it lets people know what you did at each one of these places. You know, pretty diverse and long-standing, all the way back to 2009, which is great. I can appreciate that you've put your customer service, or I'm sorry, your community service over here, and kind of looking at it, knowing that you've you know, volunteered at places for as many as almost 8 years now, is a very impressive thing. Can also appreciate that you have your portfolio website up here. This is a really strong, impactful resume, and I think that you've done a nice job of really taking a lot of history and summarizing it in a nice way. Just kind of formatting wise, if you're able to bring this portion, this kind of like top 25% up a bit more, I would make a space, right? So I would make a space between this line and when the bullet points start as well, just to kind of, that spacing, that padding is going to allow our eyes to jump more easily between each one of these work experiences in a bit more easily scannable way. Next up, we're going to take a look at Nicholas's resume here. Kind of scrolling down, definitely a nice visual interpretation. You use a lot of room up here for your name and your logo. Recommendation would be to make your name first and last on one line. Maybe perhaps make this logo just about as tall as the words up here, right? And that's going to give us, you know, a good amount of space that can kind of help you spread some of this out a little bit. You do a nice job with your sections and your hierarchy and your headings, right? So skills, qualifications, education, it's consistent. At this point, I would move your professional experience up before your education here. You know, also looking for ways that you can, you know, you've got a lot of great technical experience in your qualifications, you know, in creative, you know, directions, including marketing, branding, operations, all of that. And then scrolling down here, you know, kind of looking at your professional experience as well. When you're talking about your creativity in your portfolio work, I'd like to see you elevating your portfolio website up here, so that we associate you know, your creative work more immediately by being able to see the full scope, because your work experience doesn't necessarily communicate that you're doing creative work. So we want to get that, you know, making a strong impression right up front. We've got, let's see here, one sort of technical, not technical, but aesthetic note is that the width or the height of, let's just say like the thickness of these lines, right, are consistent in the horizontal going down, but your vertical ones are a bit thinner, right? So this here and this here, I would go ahead and make that consistent just as a point for styling. Overall, I think a few tweaks to this, you know, could definitely make it stronger. One thing that I would encourage you to do too is that, you know, like looking at where your professional experience is. Okay, these are your jobs and what you're responsible for in them. Do you have projects and or collaborations that you can share to talk about your creative work? Looking for ways, or are there things that you do in either one of these positions that allow for you to expand upon your creativity and what you're doing in terms of projects? All right, next up we are going to take a look at Gregory's. So really appreciating the visual interpretation on this, like this graphic sort of concentration on topography over here is really cool. It kind of gives us a real, it makes a statement and does so in a very sort of thoughtful design way. As we move over here into this section, it becomes a bit more jumbled and the text itself becomes harder to read because of this watermark that you've put in the background. And you've even rotated it in such a way that it doesn't, actually look like your initials anymore. So my recommendation would be for you to pull this. That's going to make your text pop out a bit more. And then look for ways to, because you've got so much information over here, to think about grouping it a bit more in terms of your proximity, right? Because you've got all of these like little chunks, but all of the little chunks are so close together that they don't seem like they're related or in different sections. So the encouragement would be to think about how do you make your your sections stand out as individual from one another. It's kind of hard to give you direct recommendations on how to do that with both the amount of information and with this watermark behind it, but kind of like some quick thoughts would be, you share what your coursework was, which, is you use a big chunk of space for that, right? And just because you took those courses that doesn't necessarily translate into a proficiency in that area. What I would say is that your portfolio would showcase that, and certainly it could be a place where you could expand upon the coursework, maybe show examples of that. If you were to remove this bit of text from here, you'd have a lot more spacing to expand upon what you did in terms of your professional experience. And I would actually encourage you to elevate your experience to the top and then followed by your this is kind of your skill. Well, here's your skill section right here. You can see it's a bit like I'm having a little trouble finding some of these things. Like, so you've got education, experience as your bigger headings. There should also be one called skills, and under skills is where you should put this information. And so it should go experience, skills, education. And then your references can be at the bottom, certainly. It's great to include that, but it takes up a good little chunk of space as well. You could also just include one line that says, references available upon request, not portfolio, right? I would, your portfolio is a bigger, stronger statement about your skills and ability than your website, or I'm sorry, than your resume. Because you can tell me all day long that you are proficient in the Creative Suite, but your portfolio will show me how proficient you are. And so you really want people looking at your portfolio. So make that easy for them. Really loving what you've done with the design here, and would love to see the next iteration of this, and provide, see if there's any additional formatting insight that I can provide to help you get this to its next best place. And then last but not least, we've got Michaela's. So we've got your name, top, front, and center. We've got your contact information up here. Kind of scrolling down, I don't see a place for your portfolio website, so I want to encourage that right off the bat. Like we shared in the last review, that your portfolio is the strongest statement of your skills and ability. Kind of scrolling down, we've got your experience, where you worked, what you've done over this good bit of time. I would put your most recent work experience at the top, right? So go from like recent to older historic. Employers are going to see like what was your most recent or like last job that you had. Kind of scrolling down here, we see with your education, you've listed your high school diploma. We shared earlier in one of the reviews that if you have college experience and working towards a college degree, which you do, then including your high school diploma isn't necessary, and so you can save additional space. kind of scrolling down again, we see some of your soft skills. You talk about being a caretaker and your work ethic and your customer service. So this is, I would say this is sort of your soft skills, but like what are you looking to do with your degree? How are you looking to transition, your professional life, given, that you now are going to have a degree in media communications, and like what is the unique combination of skills that you want to use to get a particular kind of job? It's not super clear based on this. Like you have a broad range of experience, but I can't tell from this resume, what type or what facet of the industry that you want to go in. So I think the opportunity here would be for you to think about how to direct this a little bit more and to make it a bit more easy to make the connection between your skills and experience and what Michaela can bring to a project or a team in the media communications industry. So from here, guys, the expectation is that you go ahead and make this next round of edits to your resumes prior to your next portfolio class. You will certainly be touching this again in Portfolio 7 as you get ready to graduate, and there you're going to be doing it in a more targeted, way. That is to say, how do you tweak your resume for a specific job that you're applying for? And you're going to be getting a lot more insight into, not just how do I collect all of the information and talk about the things that I do, but how do I curate the information in such a way that positions me as a viable candidate for a particular position. If you guys have any questions about this feedback, holler at me, and looking forward to seeing the next best iteration of your portfolio. Of your resumes, not your portfolio. Let me know if I can offer any additional feedback.